The bells began ringing before sunrise. Slow, heavy, final. Each sound rolled across the city like a warning that something powerful had ended. By morning, the streets around St. Matthew's Cathedral were closed. Black cars stretched down every block. Police stood guard. Reporters whispered into cameras, their voices low but excited. Microphones flashed. Headlines were already written. Billionaire titan Adrian Vance dies at 42. Inside the cathedral, everything looked perfect. White roses covered the altar. Tall candles burned in golden holders. Sunlight filtered through stained glass windows, painting the marble floor in soft colors, red, blue, gold. At the center of it all stood a polished mahogany casket trimmed in gold. Adrian Vance lay inside. So silent. The man who built an empire from nothing. The man who bought companies the way others bought coffee. The man who never lost. Until now. The front rows were filled with the powerful. Politicians with controlled expressions. Business partners with stiff shoulders. Rivals pretending to mourn. Their black suits were tailored. Their shoes shined. Their tears looked careful. But the air did not feel peaceful. It felt tense. Whispers floated from seat to seat like smoke. He was unstoppable. Heart failure, they say. I heard there was stress, legal issues. And that woman. What woman? The one who used to work at his house. No one knows what really happened. Adrian Vance had always been a mystery. He rose from poverty after his father's failed business destroyed their family name. He rebuilt everything through discipline and ruthless decisions. He trusted contracts more than people. He believed loyalty was temporary and weakness was dangerous. He never married. He never claimed a child. At least, that was the story. The choir began to sing. Soft voices filled the high ceilings. The priest spoke of legacy, of ambition, of greatness, but not once did he speak of love. Then, the massive wooden doors at the back of the cathedral opened with a long, echoing creak. Every head turned. A woman stepped inside. She wore a simple black dress. No designer label. No expensive jewelry. Her heels were modest. Her hair was tied back neatly, revealing a calm face that carried quiet strength. She did not look rich. She did not look powerful. But she did not look afraid either. Beside her stood a small boy. 5 years old, maybe. His suit was slightly too large for his small frame. His dark hair was combed carefully. His tiny hand clutched the woman's fingers tightly. His eyes were wide as he looked around at the enormous cathedral, the grand decorations, the strangers staring at him. They did not belong here. And everyone knew it. The whispers grew louder. Who is she? Is that? No, it can't be. Look at the boy. The woman did not respond to the stares. She walked down the aisle slowly, each step steady. Her back straight. Her chin lifted just enough to show dignity. When she reached the middle rows, she stopped. She did not move closer. She did not bow her head. Her eyes lifted toward the casket. Toward Adrian. The child looked up at her. Mom, he whispered softly, confused. Why are there so many people? She knelt down beside him, smoothing his hair gently. Because, she said quietly, he was important to them. Was he important to us? The question hung in the air. Before she could answer, the doors opened again. This time the sound was sharper. Urgent. A man in a gray suit hurried inside, holding a large sealed envelope. His face was serious, focused, nervous. He walked straight down the aisle, ignoring the stares, until he reached Adrian's personal lawyer near the altar. They spoke in hushed tones. The lawyer's expression changed. From calm to stunned. The man handed over the envelope. Across the front, stamped in bold red letters, were the words, "Confidential DNA results." The lawyer swallowed hard. Even from the middle of the cathedral, the woman could see it. The choir's singing faltered. A ripple of tension moved through the room. The lawyer hesitated only a second. Then he stepped forward and placed the sealed envelope directly on top of Adrian Vance's coffin. The soft sound of paper touching polished wood echoed louder than the bells had. Silence fell. Complete. Heavy. Suffocating. Adrian Vance lay inside that casket, dressed in a custom black suit. His hands folded. His face calm in death. For the first time in his life, he could not control what happened next. The woman's eyes did not leave the envelope. Not fear. Not shock. Only truth waiting for its moment. Around her, executives shifted uncomfortably. A woman in diamonds leaned toward her husband and whispered sharply. Adrian's younger brother stood stiff near the front, his jaw tightening. The child tugged gently at his mother's hand. Mom, why is everyone staring at us? She looked down at him. Her voice stayed soft. Because sometimes, she said carefully, people are afraid of what they don't understand. And what don't they understand? She looked back toward the casket, toward the envelope, toward the man who had once ruled every room he entered. They don't understand the truth, she said quietly. At the altar, the lawyer cleared his throat. But before he could speak, the wind outside howled against the cathedral walls, rattling the stained glass. The candles flickered. The sealed envelope remained still on the coffin. Adrian Vance was dead. His empire stood tall. His name filled headlines. But in that silent cathedral, beneath the weight of wealth and power, one thing had just arrived that he could no longer deny. The truth. And it was about to change everything. 3 years earlier. Before the funeral. Before the whispers. Before the sealed envelope resting on a coffin. Elena Morales stood outside a pair of tall iron gates, gripping the handle of her small suitcase. The gates were black, heavy, and taller than the house she had grown up in. Beyond them stretched a long driveway lined with perfect trees, trimmed so neatly they looked almost unreal. At the end of that driveway stood the Vance mansion. It did not look like a home. It looked like power. Marble pillars. Wide glass windows. Balconies that overlooked gardens shaped with exact precision. Even the air felt different there, clean, controlled, expensive. Elena swallowed. She was 24 years old. 6 months earlier, she had buried both her parents. Cancer had taken her mother slowly. A drunk driver had taken her father suddenly. Since then, she had become everything for her younger brother Daniel. Sister, guardian, provider. This job was not a dream. It was survival. The gates opened with a slow mechanical hum. She stepped inside. The mansion was colder than she expected. The floors shined so brightly she could see her reflection. Chandeliers hung from ceilings so high they made her feel small. Every object looked like it had been placed with careful thought. Nothing out of line, nothing out of place. She was led into a large office with dark wooden walls. That was where she met Adrian Vance. He stood by a wide window overlooking the estate. He was tall, sharp-featured, dressed in a perfectly tailored navy suit even though he was home. His dark hair was styled neatly. His watch probably cost more than her yearly salary. He did not smile when she entered. He studied her the way someone studies numbers, carefully, without emotion. "You understand the rules?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Elena replied quietly. "You work hard. You stay professional. You stay out of my personal affairs." "Yes, sir." He nodded once. That was it. No welcome. No warmth. Just expectations. Elena worked harder than anyone else in the house. She woke before sunrise. She cleaned every room from top to bottom. She organized files, polished silverware, dusted shelves lined with awards and framed magazine covers that showed Adrian shaking hands with world leaders. She noticed things others ignored. A cracked cabinet hinge in the kitchen. She tightened it without being asked. A dying plant near the staircase. She moved it toward sunlight and trimmed the dry leaves until it slowly came back to life. A small tear in the lining of one of Adrian's suit jackets. She stitched it carefully by hand. She never mentioned these things. She simply did them. The other staff members noticed her quiet focus. "She acts like this house matters," one of them once muttered. To Elena it did. It was her livelihood. Her brother's school fees. Their rent. Their food. She did not see marble floors. She saw opportunity. At night, when her work was done and the house grew silent, she would step into the garden. The estate had a small corner near the back where the lights were softer. There was a wooden bench near a fountain that made gentle splashing sounds. Elena brought books from the public library. She read slowly, sometimes moving her lips quietly as she followed the words. Sometimes she hummed. Old songs her mother used to sing while cooking. The melodies were soft, warm. They did not belong in a house built on ambition and power. But they filled the silence. Adrian began to notice. At first it was small things. His coffee was always exactly how he liked it. Strong, no sugar, served at the perfect temperature. Fresh flowers appeared in his office, arranged simply but beautifully. One afternoon he returned home from a long meeting and paused in the hallway. The house felt different. Not louder. Not busier. Just less empty. He walked toward the kitchen and saw Elena standing on a small stool, carefully fixing a loose light fixture. She didn't realize he was watching. She hummed softly while working. There was no audience. No one to impress. Just quiet effort. For reasons he did not understand, he stayed there a moment longer than necessary. Adrian Vance was used to noise, business calls, media attention, arguments over contracts. But this quiet, felt unfamiliar, and strangely comforting. One evening he noticed something else. On a shelf in the hallway stood an old photo of his father. The frame had been cracked for months. He had never bothered replacing it. Now it was new, simple, clean. He stared at it. He had not asked anyone to fix it. "Who replaced the frame?" he asked sharply during dinner. Elena froze slightly but stepped forward. "I did, sir. The glass was broken." He studied her. "You had no permission. I'm sorry if I overstepped." She lowered her eyes, but her voice did not shake. He looked back at the photo. The crack was gone. For a moment, something flickered in his expression. Not anger, not approval, something softer. "Next time," he said after a pause, "inform me first." "Yes, sir." But he did not remove the frame. Days turned into weeks. Elena's presence became part of the rhythm of the house. She did not demand attention. She did not ask questions about his business. She did not look at him with ambition in her eyes like others did. She looked at him with simple respect, and sometimes quiet understanding. One night, Adrian returned later than usual. His meeting had gone well. His company had just secured a major contract overseas. Reporters were praising him again. Investors were celebrating. He entered the mansion expecting silence. Instead he heard humming. Soft, familiar. He followed the sound and found Elena in the dining room, polishing the long wooden table. She didn't notice him at first. There was something peaceful about her. No fear. No greed. Just focus. He cleared his throat. She jumped slightly, almost dropping the cloth. "I'm sorry, sir," she said quickly. "I didn't realize you were home." "You didn't disturb me," he replied. But he did not walk away. He stood there longer than usual, watching. For the first time in years, the mansion did not feel like a fortress. It felt alive. He turned to leave, then paused. "Elena." "Yes, sir?" "Your brother. He's in school?" She blinked in surprise. He had never asked about her life before. "Yes, sir. He wants to study engineering." Adrian nodded slightly. "Good." That was all. But something had shifted. Not romance. Not fantasy. Just two lonely people existing in the same space. One built walls to survive betrayal. The other built strength to survive loss. And without either of them planning it, the silence between them began to feel less cold. The house was still large. Still powerful. Still ruled by Adrian Vance. But now, in the quiet corners of that marble mansion, there was warmth. And neither of them yet understood how dangerous that warmth could become. The storm did not begin with thunder. It began with silence. That evening, the mansion felt tense before Adrian even walked through the door. The staff had heard whispers earlier in the day. A major deal had collapsed. Investors were angry. The news channels were already talking. When Adrian finally arrived, the front doors opened harder than usual. His footsteps echoed sharply across the marble floor. Elena looked up from the kitchen. She could feel it immediately. Something was wrong. He walked past her without speaking. His jaw was tight. His eyes were darker than usual. He removed his jacket roughly and tossed it onto a chair. A glass shattered in the office seconds later. No one dared go near him. No one except Elena. She stood outside the office door for a moment, her hand hovering near the frame. She had learned to read moods in that house. Tonight, his anger felt different. Not sharp. Broken. She knocked softly. No answer. She pushed the door open slowly. Adrian stood near the large window, his back turned. The city lights glowed below like distant stars. His hands were pressed against the glass as if he needed something solid to hold him upright. "Sir," she said gently, "would you like some tea?" He laughed. Not amused. Not warm. Bitter. "Tea?" he repeated. "Do you think tea fixes betrayal?" She stayed quiet. He turned around suddenly. His tie hung loose around his collar. His eyes looked tired, more tired than she had ever seen. "Do you know what it feels like," he said, voice low, "to build something for years and watch it collapse because you trusted the wrong person?" She didn't answer immediately. She stepped further into the room. "I know what it feels like," she said softly, "to lose everything without warning." He studied her. Not as an employer. Not as a boss. But as a man searching for something. "My father trusted his partners," Adrian continued, his voice rougher now. "They destroyed his company. Took everything. He never recovered. I watched him fade away because he believed people were good." His hands clenched. "I swore I would never be weak like that." Elena felt the weight behind those words. Weak. To him, weakness meant trust. and trust meant loss. My mother used to say something, Elena said quietly. She said pain doesn't come from loving people. It comes from expecting them to never fail. He looked at her sharply. You think I expected too much? I think, she replied carefully, you expected them to be perfect. The room fell silent. The storm outside finally began. Rain hit the windows hard. Thunder rolled across the sky. For the first time, Adrian did not look powerful. He looked alone. And that loneliness was heavier than his anger. Elena, he said after a long pause, why do you stay so calm? She hesitated. Because if I panic, she said, nothing changes. When my parents died, I didn't have time to fall apart. My brother needed food, needed school, needed someone strong. Her voice didn't shake, but her eyes carried truth. I didn't become strong because I wanted to, she added quietly. I became strong because I had no choice. Something in him softened, just slightly. He took a step closer. The space between them felt fragile. I've never had anyone stay, he admitted almost to himself. Everyone leaves once they get what they want. I'm not here to get something, she said. I'm here to work. He let out a long breath. And yet, he murmured, you're the only one in this house who doesn't feel like a transaction. The words hung between them. Dangerous. Real. The thunder outside grew louder. The lights flickered once, then steadied. Adrian's eyes searched her face as if trying to understand something he had never allowed himself to feel. Elena felt her heart beat faster. She should have stepped back. She should have reminded him of boundaries. But loneliness is powerful. And that night, loneliness spoke louder than caution. He reached out, not forcefully, not carelessly, but gently, as if asking permission without words. She did not move away. It was not passion. It was not fantasy. It was two wounded people leaning on each other for warmth in a cold world. The storm outside raged. Inside, the walls that had protected Adrian for years cracked for a single moment. And that moment changed everything. The next morning, sunlight filled the mansion as if nothing had happened. Adrian was already dressed in a sharp gray suit. His expression was controlled, professional, cold. Elena, he said calmly as she entered the dining room, the investor meeting has been rescheduled. Inform the staff of schedule changes. Yes, sir, she replied. That was it. No mention of the night before. No softness. No vulnerability. If anyone had seen them, they would have believed nothing unusual had occurred. But something had. And Elena felt it in the quiet weight inside her chest. Days passed. Then weeks. Life returned to routine. Until one morning, Elena stood in the small bathroom near her room, staring at a thin white stick in her trembling hands. She had felt tired lately. Nauseous. Dizzy. She told herself it was stress. But now she knew. 2 pink lines. Her breath caught in her throat. Pregnant. The word echoed in her mind. Her fingers shook. She sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. Her heart raced, not with excitement, not yet, but with fear. What would he say? Would he believe her? Would he think she planned it? She placed her hand gently on her stomach. Alive. Small. Fragile. Innocent. Tears filled her eyes, not from regret, but from uncertainty. Outside her window, the mansion stood tall and quiet, just as it always had. But inside Elena Morales, everything had changed. And soon she would have to tell the most powerful man in the city a truth he might refuse to hear. Elena did not tell him right away. 4 days she moved through the mansion like she always had, quiet, steady, focused. But inside her, everything felt different. Every time she passed Adrian in the hallway, her heart beat faster. She tried to find the right moment. A calm moment. A human moment. But Adrian had returned fully to business mode. Meetings. Phone calls. Late nights. Sharp commands. His face was once again unreadable. The man from the stormy night was gone. Finally, one evening, Elena stood outside his office door with both hands pressed against her stomach. She took a deep breath. Then knocked. Come in, he said without looking up. He was reviewing documents, glasses resting low on his nose. The desk lamp cast a focused glow across polished wood and neatly stacked files. Yes? He asked, still not lifting his eyes. I need to speak with you, sir, she said quietly. He glanced up, impatient. Make it brief. Her throat felt dry. I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air. For a moment he didn't react. Then his expression changed. Not shock. Calculation. His eyes narrowed slightly. What did you say? I'm pregnant, she repeated. And the child is yours. Silence filled the room. He leaned back slowly in his chair. "That's impossible," he said flatly. "It's not," she replied. His jaw tightened. A muscle moved near his temple. "You expect me to believe this?" he asked coldly. "I'm not asking you to believe. I'm telling you the truth." He stood up suddenly, walking around the desk. "Do you understand the position I'm in right now?" he snapped. "My company just lost a major contract. A competitor tried to destroy my reputation last month. Now you come to me with this." Her heart pounded. "I didn't plan this." "Of course you didn't," he said sharply. "You just happened to become pregnant after one night when I wasn't thinking clearly." His words cut deeper than she expected. "I didn't trap you," she said, her voice shaking now. "Didn't you?" he fired back. "You work in my house. You know my schedule. You know my weaknesses. Do you think I don't see what this looks like?" Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "What does it look like?" she asked. "It looks like someone trying to secure her future," he replied coldly. "It looks like manipulation." She felt something break inside her. "You think I would use a child for money?" "I think," he said, voice low and hard, "that everyone wants something from me." The room felt smaller, colder. "I don't want your money," she said firmly. "I want you to know you're going to be a father." He laughed bitterly. "A father?" he repeated. "You expect me to accept that without proof? I can take a test." His eyes flashed. "Oh, I'm sure you can." That was when she understood. He wasn't listening. He wasn't questioning. He had already decided. "I trusted someone once," he said, pacing slowly. "He destroyed my company. Almost destroyed me. I won't make that mistake again." "I'm not your enemy," she whispered. He stopped walking. "No," he said quietly. "You're worse." Her breath caught. "You were inside my walls." The words felt like a slap. She stood there, hands trembling slightly. "Believe what you want," she said softly. "But this child is yours." His face hardened completely. "You're dismissed." The finality in his tone felt heavier than any scream. "Sir." "You're fired," he corrected sharply. "Effective immediately." Her world tilted. "What?" "I won't tolerate deception in my home." "I didn't lie." "Security will escort you out," he said, turning back toward his desk as if she no longer existed. She stood frozen. "You're not even going to consider the possibility?" she asked, her voice breaking now. He didn't look at her. "I consider risks," he replied. "And you are one." The words crushed whatever hope she had left. Moments later, 2 security guards appeared at the door. Elena walked past them on her own. She did not beg. She did not scream. She did not cry. Not in front of him. Rain poured heavily outside as she stepped out of the mansion. Thunder roared across the sky. The same kind of storm as that night. Only this time there was no warmth. Only rejection. A manager hurried behind her, holding an envelope. "Miss Morales," he said awkwardly. "Mr. Vance has provided compensation." She looked at the envelope, then back at the mansion. "No," she said quietly. "It's generous," the manager insisted. "I don't want it." She walked away into the rain, her suitcase rolling behind her. Water soaked through her clothes. Her hair stuck to her face, but she kept walking. Each step felt heavy. Each breath hurt. When she finally reached the bus stop at the end of the road, she sat down slowly under the small metal shelter. The mansion stood tall in the distance. Untouched. Unmoved. She placed her trembling hand over her stomach. Tears finally fell. "I'm sorry," she whispered, not to Adrian, to the child. "I thought he would listen." Her voice steadied. "But it's just us now." Thunder cracked above her. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "I don't know how," she said softly, her palm resting protectively over her belly, "but I promise you something." Her voice grew stronger. "We will survive." The rain continued to fall. Behind her, Adrian Vance stood alone in his office, staring out at the storm. But he did not look toward the gate. And he did not see the woman carrying his child walk away. That night, pride won. And love lost. But the truth was still growing. The rain stopped by morning. But Elena's new life had already begun. She rented a small one-bedroom apartment on the edge of the city. The paint on the walls was chipped. The heater made strange noises at night. The windows let in cold air during winter. It was nothing like the Vance mansion. But it was hers. And now it had to be enough. Elena found work quickly. Not one job. 3. In the mornings she cleaned offices downtown. In the afternoons she worked at a small grocery store stocking shelves. At night, she washed dishes in a restaurant kitchen that smelled of oil and soap. Her body grew tired, but she never complained. When her feet swelled from standing too long, she sat quietly and pressed them with her hands. When nausea hit, she leaned against a wall until it passed. Some people noticed her growing belly. Some people judged. "You should have thought ahead," one woman muttered at the grocery store. Elena didn't respond. She had learned something important. Not every opinion deserved her energy. At home, she cooked simple meals for herself and her younger brother Daniel. She made sure his school uniform was clean. She helped him with homework even when her eyes struggled to stay open. "You're going to be okay, right?" Daniel asked one night, noticing her exhaustion. She smiled softly. "We're going to be more than okay." She believed that. She had to. Months passed. Her belly grew round and firm. Some nights she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if Adrian ever thought about her, if he ever questioned his decision. But she never reached for her phone. She never sent a message. Pride had pushed her out of that mansion. But strength would keep her standing. The day Matteo was born, the sky was clear. The hospital room was small but clean. Elena gripped the sheets tightly, breathing through waves of pain. She had no partner beside her. No family except Daniel, who waited nervously outside. But she did not feel alone. When she finally heard her baby cry for the first time, something inside her healed. The nurse placed him gently in her arms. He was small, warm, fragile. His tiny fingers curled around hers. And when she looked into his face, her breath caught. He had Adrian's eyes. Dark, sharp, unmistakable. Tears filled her eyes, not from sadness this time, but from something deeper. "Love." "Matteo," she whispered softly. She did not choose the name because of Adrian. She chose it because it meant gift. And that was what he was. Not a mistake. Not a burden. A gift. Life with a newborn was harder than she imagined. Matteo cried at night, hungry and confused. Elena rocked him gently in the small living room while the city lights blinked outside the window. She hummed the same songs her mother once sang. Sometimes she cried quietly too, but never where Matteo could see. She stitched old baby clothes together to make new ones when money ran short. She saved every extra dollar in a jar hidden behind canned food in the kitchen cabinet. When Matteo began to crawl, she followed him across the apartment floor, laughing softly as he explored every corner. "Be kind," she would whisper as he learned his first steps. "Be strong. Be better." She never spoke badly about his father. Not once. Even when she felt hurt. Across the city, Adrian Vance stood at the top of a new glass tower that carried his company's name. His empire grew. He signed new contracts. He expanded into new markets. News articles called him unstoppable again. But the mansion felt empty. More empty than before. The staff did their jobs. The flowers were fresh. The lights were bright. But something quiet was missing. Sometimes, late at night, Adrian walked past the garden bench where Elena used to sit. He told himself he did not miss her. He told himself she had tried to deceive him. But once or twice when no one was watching he paused. And he remembered her humming. He pushed the memory away quickly. Work was easier than reflection. Years passed. Matteo grew from a baby into a bright-eyed toddler with endless questions. He loved toy cars. He laughed loudly. He followed Elena around the apartment like a shadow. "Mom, why don't we live in a big house?" he once asked after seeing a mansion on television. She smiled. "Because we don't need a big house to have a big heart." He accepted that answer easily. Children do. At night, after Matteo fell asleep, Elena sometimes sat by the window. She thought about the path her life had taken. About the storm. About the office. About the words that cut deeper than rain. But then she would hear Matteo's soft breathing from the bedroom. And regret would fade. Because whatever pain she had endured had led to him. And that made it worth surviving. Adrian's empire continued to rise. But inside him, something was quietly falling apart. He attended events with models and socialites. He smiled for cameras. He dated publicly but never seriously. Every relationship ended quickly. He claimed he was too busy. But the truth was simpler. He did not trust easily. And he did not allow anyone close enough to hurt him. Not again. Not like that. One evening as he left a charity gala, he saw something that made him stop. Across the street stood a young woman holding a small boy's hand. The boy looked up at her with wide eyes. Dark eyes. For a split second, Adrian's chest tightened. The child looked familiar. But before he could think further, a driver opened his car door. "Sir?" Adrian looked away. He told himself it was coincidence. He told himself he had made the right choice. He stepped into the car, and the moment passed. But somewhere in the city, a little boy with his eyes was learning to walk, learning to speak, learning to love. Without him, Elena lay in bed that night, Matteo curled against her side. She placed her hand gently over his back. "I promised you," she whispered into the darkness. "We would survive." And they had. But neither of them knew that the story between them and the man who walked away was far from over. Success can hide many things. It can hide fear. It can hide regret. It can even hide loneliness. But it cannot erase them. Adrian Vance stood at the top of his glass tower, looking down at the city he once felt he controlled. The skyline shimmered under the afternoon sun. Cars moved like ants. People rushed through streets without knowing his name was written on half the buildings around them. He should have felt powerful. Instead, he felt tired. His company was expanding faster than ever. New investments, international deals, public praise. But behind closed doors, cracks were forming. A trusted executive leaked sensitive information to a competitor. A major investor pulled out without warning. Lawsuits began piling up over aggressive contracts Adrian had once signed without hesitation. For the first time in years, he was not ahead. He was reacting. "Sir, we need to slow expansion," one board member advised carefully during a tense meeting. Adrian's jaw tightened. "We don't slow down," he replied coldly. "We adapt." But even as he said it, he felt the strain in his chest. It started as pressure. A dull ache that came and went. He ignored it. He had ignored worse. His doctor called after a routine checkup. "You need to reduce stress," the doctor warned. "Your heart is not a machine." Adrian almost laughed. "My entire life runs on pressure," he said. "Pressure breaks things," the doctor replied. Adrian ended the call. He had no time for weakness. The mansion felt larger than ever. More silent. He walked through hallways that once echoed with Elena's soft humming. He told himself he barely remembered her voice. But memory is stubborn. Sometimes late at night he paused near the garden bench. He imagined her sitting there with a book, her hair falling gently across her shoulder. He imagined the way she spoke calmly even when he was angry. He remembered the look in her eyes the night she told him she was pregnant. Not greedy. Not manipulative. The thought unsettled him. He pushed it away. She lied, he told himself. She wanted security. That explanation was easier. Safer. He began dating again. Public dinners. Photographers. Women who smiled brightly and asked about his business. They admired his power. They admired his wealth. But none of them asked him about his fears. None of them challenged him. None of them hummed in empty hallways. Every relationship ended the same way. Too shallow. Too easy. Too hollow. One evening, Adrian attended a small charity event downtown. He did not want to go, but his public image required it. As he stepped outside afterward, something caught his attention. Across the street stood a woman holding the hand of a small boy. The boy looked up at her and laughed. That laugh, clear and innocent, cut through the noise of traffic. Adrian's gaze shifted to the child's face. Dark eyes. Sharp eyebrows. Something in his chest tightened. For a brief second, the world seemed to slow. The child turned his head slightly. And Adrian felt as if he were looking into a mirror of his own childhood. His breath caught. The driver opened the car door beside him. "Sir?" Adrian blinked. The moment broke. When he looked again, the woman and child were already walking away. He stood frozen longer than he meant to. The ache in his chest returned, stronger this time. He pressed his hand against his suit jacket, trying to steady himself. "It's coincidence," he muttered. But doubt had already planted its seed. The business pressure grew worse. Headlines shifted from praise to criticism. Vance empire facing internal conflict. Investors questioned Adrian Vance's strategy. At home, he began waking in the middle of the night, breath shallow, heart racing. He told no one. Pride had built his empire. And pride would not allow him to show cracks. But alone in his office one night, he opened a drawer he rarely touched. Inside lay a small folded piece of paper. Elena's employee file. He stared at her name. Elena Morales. He remembered the way she stood in front of his desk that day, hands shaking but voice steady. "I didn't trap you." Her words echoed. For the first time, uncertainty pierced through his certainty. What if she had been telling the truth? What if he had pushed away something real? His heart pounded harder. He closed the drawer quickly. No, he could not allow that thought to grow. Because if she had told the truth, then he had not just fired a maid. He had abandoned his own child. The idea shook him more than any business failure ever had. Days later, during an important board presentation, the pressure finally broke. Mid-sentence, Adrian felt a sharp pain shoot through his chest. His vision blurred. The room tilted. He tried to continue speaking, but the words would not come. He reached for the table to steady himself. The last thing he saw was the worried face of his assistant rushing toward him. Then darkness. At the hospital, doctors worked quickly. Severe cardiac episode, one of them said. He ignored warnings. When Adrian regained consciousness, machines beeped softly around him. White walls. Sterile air. No cameras. No applause. No control. He stared at the ceiling. For the first time in his life he felt small. Fragile. Human. His doctor stood beside the bed. You were lucky, the doctor said firmly. But luck runs out. Adrian closed his eyes. In the quiet of that hospital room, surrounded by machines instead of marble floors, one memory returned clearly. Elena's voice. I'm not your enemy. His chest tightened, not from pain this time but from regret. But pride is a powerful prison. And even as doubt filled his mind, he told himself it was too late. Too complicated. Too risky. Outside the hospital window, the city moved forward without him. Somewhere across town, a little boy with dark eyes laughed as his mother chased him around a small apartment. Adrian lay in his hospital bed, staring at a ceiling that did not care how rich he was. Wealth could buy buildings. It could buy silence. It could buy power. But it could not buy back moments. And it could not protect him from the consequences of his own pride. After the hospital, Adrian returned to the mansion quieter than before. The doctors had called it a warning. Your heart cannot handle this pace, they said. But Adrian had never known how to move slowly. The house felt different when he walked back inside. Not grand. Not powerful. Empty. He moved through the hallway without speaking to anyone. The staff watched him carefully as if he were made of glass now. That night, instead of opening financial reports, Adrian opened something else. A blank sheet of paper. He sat at his large wooden desk. The same desk where he had fired Elena. The memory made his chest tighten. He picked up a pen. For several minutes he did nothing. Then slowly he began to write. Elena. The name alone felt heavy. He stopped. Started again. I don't know if this letter will ever reach you. He stared at the sentence. He was a man who negotiated billion-dollar contracts without fear. But writing to her felt harder than any deal he had ever signed. He continued. I have replayed that day many times in my mind. I told myself I made the right decision. I told myself I was protecting my company. My name. His grip tightened around the pen. But I may have been protecting my pride instead. He paused. That word felt dangerous. Pride. He leaned back in his chair and looked toward the window. The garden bench was visible from there. He remembered her sitting there at night, reading quietly. He remembered her humming. He remembered the look in her eyes when she told him she was pregnant. Not greedy. Not desperate. Hurt. The memory disturbed him more than he wanted to admit. He returned to the letter. If there is even a small chance that what you said was true, then I owe you more than silence. His hand hesitated. The thought formed slowly. DNA test. Proof. He could request it quietly. Privately. No scandal. No risk. But another thought followed quickly. What if it was true? What if she had been carrying his child all along? That would mean he had thrown away more than a maid. He had thrown away blood. He had thrown away a chance to be something other than alone. He stood abruptly and walked to the window. Rain began to fall lightly outside. I don't make mistakes, he muttered to himself. But the words sounded weaker now. He returned to the desk and added one final line. If you are willing, I would like to meet and discuss the truth. He stared at the letter. Then folded it slowly. He placed it inside an envelope and set it aside. The next morning he picked it up again. Read it once. Then twice. He imagined her opening it. He imagined her looking at him with disappointment. Or worse, indifference. Fear tightened in his chest. He was not afraid of losing money. He was afraid of being wrong. Afraid of facing the damage he had caused. He opened a drawer and placed the envelope inside. Unsent. 2 days later, Adrian collapsed again. This time there was no warning. He was alone in his office when the pain struck. Sure. Violent. He tried to stand. His vision blurred. He reached for the edge of the desk but missed. The room spun. The last thing he saw was the drawer where the letter lay hidden. Then everything went dark. The news spread within hours. Adrian Vance, billionaire CEO, dead at 42. Television channels replayed footage of his business victories. Reporters spoke about his rise from poverty to power. They called him fearless. They called him brilliant. They called him controversial. But none of them spoke about the letter inside his desk. The one that never reached the woman who deserved it. Across town, Elena was folding laundry when her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. A news alert. She froze. Her fingers tightened around the fabric. The headline stared back at her. Adrian Vance dies of heart failure. The room felt suddenly smaller. Mateo was playing on the floor with toy cars, making quiet engine sounds. Elena sat down slowly on the couch. For a moment she felt nothing. No anger. No relief. Just silence. Daniel rushed in from the kitchen. "Did you see the news?" he asked gently. She nodded. "Are you okay?" he asked. She forced a small smile. "I'm fine." But later that night, when Mateo was asleep, she sat alone at the kitchen table. The apartment was quiet except for the ticking of a cheap wall clock. Tears slid down her face before she realized they were falling. Not because she loved him. Not because she missed him. But because something unfinished had just become permanent. She wiped her eyes quickly when she heard small footsteps. Mateo stood in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. "Mom," he whispered. "Why are you crying?" She opened her arms. He walked into them without hesitation. She held him tightly. "Sometimes," she said softly, "grown-ups cry when they don't get to finish things." He looked up at her. "Did you want to finish something?" She kissed the top of his head. "Yes," she whispered. "I think I did." He wrapped his small arms around her neck. "It's okay, Mom," he said simply. "Children forgive easily. Adults carry weight longer." Elena closed her eyes and held her son closer. Across the city, preparations were already beginning for a funeral that would shake the business world. But neither she nor Mateo knew yet that Adrian had taken one final step before his death. Because days before he collapsed, he had quietly ordered a DNA test through his legal team. He had never sent the letter. But he had asked for the truth. And the results were still on their way. Time lost cannot be reclaimed. But sometimes even too late. The truth still arrives. 3 days after Adrian's death, a black car stopped in front of Elena's apartment building. It did not belong there. The building was old. The paint near the entrance was peeling. Children played in the hallway. Laundry hung from small balconies. The car looked like it had stepped out of another world. A man in a dark suit stepped out and walked carefully around puddles on the sidewalk. He held a large envelope in his hand. Elena opened the door cautiously when he knocked. "Yes?" she asked. "Ms. Elena Morales?" he said politely. "Yes. I am representing the legal office of Adrian Vance." Her body stiffened. "I have something for you." He handed her the envelope and left without saying another word. The door closed slowly. For a moment she just stared at the envelope in her hands. The paper was thick. Official. She opened it carefully. Inside was a formal letter. She read it once. Then again. Her hands began to tremble slightly. "What is it?" Daniel asked, stepping closer. Elena swallowed. "They are requesting that Mateo and I attend the reading of Adrian's will." Daniel's eyes widened. "Why?" She shook her head slowly. "I don't know." But deep down, she had a feeling. That night, Elena barely slept. She sat by the window long after Mateo fell asleep. The city lights blinked outside, steady and indifferent. Should she go? The funeral would be filled with powerful people. People who looked down on women like her. People who would whisper. Who would judge. She did not owe them anything. But Mateo. He deserved answers. He deserved truth. The next morning she made her decision. "We're going," she told Daniel quietly. For him. Elena walked to her small closet and pulled out her only black dress. Simple. Plain. But clean. She ironed it carefully. She polished Mateo's shoes until they shined as best they could. He watched her curiously. "Mom, where are we going?" he asked. "To a church," she said gently. "Why?" She knelt down so her eyes were level with his. "We're going to say goodbye to someone." "Do I know him?" She hesitated, then answered honestly. "Yes." Mateo tilted his head. "Is he family?" The word felt heavy. "Yes," she whispered. "In a way." He seemed satisfied with that answer. Children often accept things adults struggle to explain. Before leaving, Elena opened a small drawer in her bedroom. Inside was a thin folder. Months ago, after Adrian's first collapse made headlines, doubt had crept into her heart. Not about the truth, but about what might happen if something unexpected occurred. So she had done something quietly, privately. She had taken Matteo for a DNA test using strands of Adrian's hair she once found on a coat left behind during a rushed event long ago. The results had come back clear. 99.99%. She had kept the documents hidden. Not to expose him, but to protect her son if necessary. Now she placed the folder into her bag, just in case. The cathedral loomed large as they arrived. Black cars lined the street. Reporters stood behind barriers. Cameras flashed constantly. As Elena stepped out of the taxi with Matteo's hand in hers, flashes turned toward them briefly. She kept her head down. They walked slowly up the steps. The massive doors stood open. Inside, the air smelled of roses and polished wood. Heads turned as soon as they entered. Whispers began almost immediately. That's her. She actually came. Look at the boy. Elena felt every stare. But she did not shrink. She walked forward with calm dignity. Matteo squeezed her hand tighter. Mom, he whispered softly, why are they looking at us like that? She bent slightly toward him. Because sometimes, she said gently, people don't like surprises. He nodded as if that made perfect sense. They found seats near the back. Elena could see Adrian's coffin at the front. For a moment her breath caught. He looked peaceful. So different from the man who had stood behind that desk years ago. So different from the man who had turned her away. Matteo leaned closer. Is that him? He whispered. Yes. Why is he sleeping in a box? Her chest tightened. He's not sleeping, she said softly. He's resting. Matteo studied the coffin quietly. Did he know me? He asked suddenly. The question pierced deeper than anything else that day. Elena swallowed hard. No, she said honestly. He didn't. Matteo looked thoughtful. Will he know me now? She wrapped her arm around him. I think, she whispered, he will soon. At the front, Adrian's lawyer stood near the coffin. He looked serious, uneasy, as if he were waiting for something. Elena felt her heart begin to pound. The folder in her bag suddenly felt heavier. Something was coming. She could feel it. The choir began to sing. Speeches followed. Words about greatness, power, vision. But beneath those words, tension hummed like a low current. Then, the cathedral doors opened sharply. A man in a gray suit hurried down the aisle holding a sealed envelope. Elena's breath caught. She had seen that kind of envelope before. Official. Urgent. The man handed it to the lawyer. The lawyer's face changed as he read the front. Confidential DNA results. Elena's heart began to race. She did not know Adrian had ordered a test. She did not know the truth had already been set in motion. But she understood one thing clearly. Whatever was inside that envelope, it was about to change everything. And this time, she was not running away. The cathedral had never felt so silent. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. At the front, Adrian Vance's lawyer stood beside the polished coffin, the sealed envelope in his trembling hands. Confidential DNA results. The red letters looked almost too bright against the white roses. Whispers spread quickly through the rows. DNA. What does that mean? Who ordered it? Elena's heart pounded so loudly she thought others might hear it. Matteo stood close to her side, holding her hand. Mom, he whispered. What's happening? She squeezed his hand gently. Just stay close to me, she said softly. At the altar, the lawyer cleared his throat. Ladies and gentlemen, he began carefully, before the final reading of Mr. Vance's will, an additional document has arrived. It was requested privately by Mr. Vance shortly before his passing. A ripple moved through the room. Requested by him? Elena's breath caught. So he had doubted. He had questioned. He had searched for truth. But too late. The lawyer broke the seal slowly. The sound of tearing paper echoed unnaturally loud in the quiet cathedral. He unfolded the documents inside and scanned the page. His face went pale. Adrian's younger brother stood abruptly. What is it? He demanded. The lawyer swallowed. These are certified DNA test results conducted by an independent laboratory. Every head turned toward Elena. Her stomach tightened. She felt eyes burning into her back. The lawyer continued. The results confirm with 99.99% probability that the minor child present in this cathedral. His eyes lifted. They found Matteo. Is the biological son of Mr. Adrian Vance. Gasps exploded through the room. Some people stood up. Others covered their mouths. A woman in the front row whispered sharply, Impossible. Adrian's brother's face turned red. This is ridiculous, he snapped. There must be a mistake. The lab is internationally accredited, the lawyer replied firmly. The results are legally binding. Silence crashed down like a wave. Elena stood very still. She had imagined this moment once or twice in her mind. But not like this. Not in front of cameras. Not in front of people who never believed she belonged in this room. Matteo looked up at her, confused by the sudden noise. "Mom, why are they saying my name?" She knelt quickly and placed both hands on his shoulders. "They're just learning something important," she said softly. "Am I in trouble?" Her heart broke a little. "No," she whispered. "You did nothing wrong." At the front, the lawyer continued, his voice steady despite the tension. "There is a final clause in Mr. Vance's will that must now be addressed." Adrian's brother turned sharply. "What clause?" The lawyer unfolded another page. "If paternity is confirmed through legal DNA testing," he read carefully, "the child shall inherit controlling shares of Vance Global Holdings. Said shares shall be held in trust until the child reaches legal age." The words echoed across marble walls. Controlling shares. The room erupted. This is absurd. He never mentioned a child. This will destroy the company. Executives exchanged alarmed looks. Investors whispered urgently. Cameras near the back flashed wildly as reporters realized the magnitude of the moment. Elena remained still. Calm. Not proud. Not vengeful. Just steady. This was never about revenge. It was about truth. Adrian's brother stepped forward angrily. "This woman manipulated him," he shouted. "This is a scam." Elena slowly stood. Her voice did not shake when she spoke. "I never asked for this," she said quietly. "I never asked for your money. I never asked for your company." Her eyes moved toward the coffin. "I only asked him to believe me." The words hung heavy in the air. The lawyer raised a hand for silence. "Whether or not anyone approves," he said firmly, "the legal documents are clear. Mr. Vance ordered this test himself. The results confirm paternity. The will stands." Adrian Vance had spoken one final time. Through paperwork. Through proof. Through truth. Matteo looked at the coffin thoughtfully. "That man is my dad?" he asked softly. The word dad felt like glass in Elena's chest. "Yes," she said gently. "Why didn't he come see me?" Her throat tightened. She brushed her fingers through his hair. "He didn't know how," she answered honestly. Matteo considered that quietly. He looked toward the coffin again. "He looks lonely," he said. The simple observation struck deeper than any accusation. Elena's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away. At the altar, chaos slowly began to settle into stunned silence. The truth had arrived. Too late for apologies. Too late for reconciliation. But not too late to change the future. Elena walked slowly toward the front of the cathedral, Matteo beside her. Gasps followed her steps. She stopped a few feet from the coffin. For a moment, she simply looked at Adrian. He looked peaceful. Free from pride. Free from fear. "You asked for the truth," she whispered quietly so only he could hear. "You just didn't wait long enough." She placed a gentle hand on Matteo's back. "This is your father," she said softly to her son. "And whether he was ready or not, you were always his." Matteo stepped closer. He looked at Adrian's still face. "Hi," he whispered. The single word echoed louder than all the gasps before it. Behind them, the powerful watched in silence. Because in that moment, wealth meant nothing. Control meant nothing. Legacy had shifted. Adrian Vance was dead. But his truth stood beside his coffin, alive, and holding his mother's hand. The silence in the cathedral did not last long. Within hours, the news exploded. Secret heir revealed at Billionaire's funeral. DNA test shocks Vance family. Unknown child inherits corporate empire. Reporters crowded outside the cathedral doors. Cameras followed Elena as she walked down the steps with Matteo's hand in hers. Microphones pushed toward her face. "Ms. Morales, did you plan this? Were you in contact with Adrian before his death? Will you take control of the company?" She kept walking. "No comment," she said calmly. Not once did she raise her voice. Not once did she look angry. Inside, however, her heart felt heavy. This was never the life she wanted. She did not dream of boardrooms. She did not dream of wealth. She dreamed of stability, of peace, of raising her son with dignity. That night, their small apartment felt smaller than ever. News vans parked outside. Neighbors whispered in the hallway. Daniel shut the curtains tightly. "This is insane," he muttered. "They're acting like you robbed a bank." Elena sat quietly at the table, watching Matteo draw on a piece of paper. He was sketching a tall building with stick figures beside it. "Is that the church?" she asked softly. "No," he said. "It's Dad's house." Her chest tightened. "He had a big house," Matteo continued thoughtfully. "But it looked empty." She nodded slowly. "Yes," she said. "It did." 2 days later, a formal meeting was scheduled at Vance Global Holdings. The board members requested Elena's presence. When she entered the glass building for the first time since she had left the mansion years ago, memories rushed back. The polished floors, the sharp suits, the cold stares. Only this time she was not carrying cleaning supplies. She was carrying authority. The boardroom was tense. Executives sat stiffly around a long table. Some looked nervous, others looked resentful. The company's interim chairman cleared his throat. "Ms. Morales," he began carefully, "your son now holds controlling shares in this company. Until he reaches legal age, you will act as his legal guardian in all corporate matters." Elena sat quietly. "I don't know anything about running a corporation," she said honestly. "That can be arranged," the chairman replied. "Advisors can assist you. But legally, your approval will be required for major decisions." Another board member leaned forward. "With respect," he said sharply, "this situation could destabilize the company. Investors are uncertain." Elena met his gaze calmly. "I never asked for this," she repeated. "But I will not allow my son's future to be treated like a problem." Silence filled the room. "We would like you to take an active role," the chairman added. "At least publicly. Stability depends on perception." Perception. That word again. Her life had nearly been destroyed by perception once before. She stood slowly. "I need time," she said. That evening, Elena returned to Adrian's grave alone. The cemetery was quiet. The city noise felt far away. She stood in front of the polished stone bearing his name. Adrian Vance. 1981 to 2023. The numbers felt too short for such a powerful life. She folded her hands in front of her. "You finally believed me," she said softly. The wind moved gently through the trees. "I wish you had done it sooner." There was no anger in her voice. Only sadness. "You were afraid," she continued quietly. "Afraid of losing control. Afraid of being betrayed." She paused. "But you never understood something." Her voice softened further. "Trust is not weakness." A tear slid down her cheek. "I forgave you the day I walked away," she whispered. "You just never knew." She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them with new resolve. "I won't let your company stay the way it was," she said firmly. "I won't let fear define it." The next morning she returned to the boardroom. The members watched her carefully. "I will accept the responsibility," she announced calmly. Surprise flickered across several faces. "But not to protect profits," she continued. "To protect people." She outlined her conditions clearly. Stronger worker protections. Fair wages across all branches. A foundation funded by corporate profits to support single mothers and children. Several board members objected immediately. "That's not how this company has operated," one argued. She held his gaze. "It is now." The room fell quiet. For the first time, the woman who had once been escorted out in the rain stood at the head of the table. Not because she wanted power, but because she refused to let her son inherit cruelty. At home that night, Matteo climbed into her lap. "Mom," he asked softly, "are we rich now?" She smiled gently. "We have more than we did before." "You thought about that? Does that mean we're better than other people?" Her smile faded slightly. "No," she said firmly. "It means we have a bigger responsibility." He nodded seriously as if understanding something important. Elena looked at her son, the boy who carried Adrian's eyes but not his pride. She made herself a promise. Matteo would grow up knowing truth, not fear. He would learn that strength was not about control. It was about compassion. Outside, the city buzzed with speculation. Investors watched closely. The Vance name filled headlines again. But this time the story was different. The empire that had once been built on ambition alone was beginning to change. And at its center stood a woman who had once been dismissed as a risk. Now she was the guardian of its future. Not seeking revenge. Not chasing wealth. But choosing transformation. Because some endings are not destruction. They are correction. And sometimes redemption begins in the silence that follows truth. 5 years later. The Vance building still stood tall in the center of the city. Its glass walls reflected sunlight the same way they always had. The name at the top still read, Vance Global Holdings. But inside the atmosphere felt different. Softer. More human. Employees no longer rushed through hallways in fear of losing their jobs. There were childcare programs funded by the company. Maternity leave policies had changed. Scholarships had been created under a new branch called the Mateo Foundation. Most people didn't know the full story behind the changes. They only knew that the company no longer felt cold. And at the heart of that transformation stood Elena Morales. She never moved into the mansion. She chose to stay in a modest home closer to Daniel, who had now graduated as an engineer, just as he once dreamed. Money had changed their comfort. It had not changed their values. Elena dressed simply. She drove herself to work most days. She spoke to staff members by name. She listened. And people respected her, not because she controlled shares but because she showed care. Mateo was now 10 years old, tall for his age, bright, kind. He had inherited Adrian's sharp eyes and strong features. But his smile was all Elena. He loved science. He asked endless questions. He was curious about everything, from how engines worked to why the sky looked pink at sunset. One afternoon he walked into Elena's office after school, holding a history book. "Mom," he said thoughtfully, "why do people call Dad a legend?" Elena looked up from her paperwork. "Because he built something very big," she answered calmly. Mateo tilted his head. Was he a good man? The question did not shock her anymore. She had known this day would come. She closed her folder gently and motioned for him to sit. "Your father was brilliant," she said carefully. "He worked harder than almost anyone I've ever known." Mateo listened quietly. "But," she continued softly, "he was also afraid." "Afraid of what?" Mateo asked. "Of being hurt. Of being betrayed. Of losing control." Mateo frowned slightly. "Did he love us?" Elena paused. The truth deserved respect. "I believe he did," she said gently. "But he didn't know how to show it." Mateo looked down at his hands. "That's sad." "Yes," she agreed quietly. "It is." "But you loved him?" he asked. She thought for a moment. "I cared about him," she answered honestly. "And I forgave him." "Why?" She reached across the desk and squeezed his hand. "Because holding anger only makes your heart heavy. And I didn't want you to grow up carrying something that wasn't yours." Mateo nodded slowly as if storing those words somewhere important. Later that week they visited the cemetery together. The sky was calm. The wind moved gently through the trees. Adrian's grave was simple. Polished stone. Clean lines. Elena stood back as Mateo stepped forward, holding fresh white flowers. He knelt carefully and placed them at the base of the stone. "Hi," he said softly, just like he had 5 years ago in the cathedral. But this time there was no confusion in his voice. Only peace. "I'm doing well in school," Mateo continued quietly. "Mom says I'm good at math. Maybe I got that from you." Elena smiled faintly behind him. "I'm not mad at you," Mateo added after a moment. "I just wish you stayed longer." The wind picked up slightly, brushing through his hair. He stood and walked back to his mother. "Do you think he can hear me?" he asked. Elena looked at the name carved in stone. "I think," she said gently, "that love doesn't disappear just because someone does." Mateo seemed satisfied with that answer. They stood there together in silence. No bitterness. No regret. Just understanding. On the drive home, Mateo looked out the window thoughtfully. "Mom," he said, "when I grow up, I want to build something too." She smiled. "What kind of something?" "Something big," he replied. "But not lonely." Her eyes softened. "That's a good goal." He leaned his head against the seat. "Dad built an empire," he said. "But you built a family." The words caught her off guard. Tears filled her eyes, not from pain but from pride. When they reached home, Mateo ran inside, laughing as Daniel teased him about unfinished homework. Elena stood in the driveway for a moment, looking up at the evening sky. 5 years ago, she had stood outside a cathedral as whispers followed her. 5 years ago, truth had arrived too late for apologies. But not too late for change. Adrian Vance had built towers of glass and steel. Elena had built something quieter, stronger. A legacy shaped not by fear, but by forgiveness. Some men build empires. Others build legacies. And sometimes, even love that arrives too late can still redeem what pride once destroyed.